Okay, I think maybe we're live here. Welcome everyone to today's Heart-Led Artist Community Live Studio session. We are starting a brand new series that I'm excited about, and it's a day we get to paint. So it's a day we should be excited and feeling really grateful for this beautiful medium of watercolor. I'm just going to make sure you can hear me. My color is really washed out today. I don't know why that is, except for I know that it seems like the system, the lighting system that works in the summer doesn't always work in the winter, and it's definitely getting into that kind of gray, dark season here in northern British Columbia. Let's just take a look at what we've got today. I've talked last week, I walked you through my trip to Italy and the plein air painting I did on location, recognizing that the work I was doing there was all development work. These are, I like the word development work. I used to use just a sketch. I used to give myself that little reassurance every time I started a painting. This is just a sketch. This is not important. This doesn't have to define you. Just, be here to get something down on paper. And I like the word development piece because what I realized was over time, those just as sketches, sometimes they turned out, sometimes they didn't, but they all taught me something, and it brought me closer to being able to say the things I wanted to say in my paintings. And when a painting, hits on all those points, when it feels like just a little yes in my heart, that's really the best way I have of describing how I know when something is expressing what I know to share from me. There's just a little yes inside of me. Sometimes those little yeses are a little tiny glimmer in a corner of the paper, just one brush stroke that seemed to work. And, sometimes everything does come together and create something really special. I like to think about my little heart yeses in the outcome as coming from a yes process, a time spent painting where I give myself permission to be the artist I'm supposed to be the artist that I've been designed to be. And I'm not like all the other artists. We're all unique and individual. I don't have to feel guilty or ashamed that I'm not approaching my watercolor practice like like someone else. That I'm not that the things that I avoid doing, I don't have to feel guilty that I'm not inviting them into my process. I get to recognize that I get to paint for me, and that's just what I want to focus on in my painting practice. To say yes to my way of doing things and allow it to move me closer to that yes outcome where those things come together. Just taking a quick look at the comments, making sure I don't have any immediate questions to start us off. We're going to be starting a series today, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take us to get through it. As long as it takes, that's what I'm here for, and that's my mindset toward the approach I use for painting in a series. And I like the idea of just jumping into a subject, and you and I are going to think about it and process it for as long as it takes to get to an outcome that we are happy with, and make a process that we feel good about. So as I was looking at my pictures from Italy, we've also had, I also shared recently a email where I talked about working from photos that aren't so great. I'm not always the best photographer, and I'm always working to be a better photographer, but I often avoid painting my best photos. And let's just see if we can't make it work on my screen here to show you some of my photos from my trip. I've already showed you a few of them, and we're going to go back to taking a look at some of those photos, if I can find it here. There we go. Okay, so this is probably my favorite photo from the entire trip, or one of my top three anyhow. This is Manarola on Cinque Terre, and this is such an iconic scene, and I'm not going to paint it today. I often, a scene like this, it contains so much. The curving form of the rocks to me is really beautiful. It has a strength to it. Of course, that contrast with the beautiful hue of the water and the white of the water breaking on the shoreline. the boats, speckled around. And then, of course, the cluster of houses, the unique way they perch on that rock, and the beautiful colors they contain. There's so much to love here. And when a photo has this much going on, I have to recognize that a beautifully composed photo for me is often not what my art is. It's really not what my art is about. And there are many artists who love to take a scene like this, full of detail in every corner, and how the way it moves and flows together to compose this powerful scene is breathtaking. But for me, I've realized that over the years, my art has become more and more about noticing small things, small beauties within, a vaster scope. It becomes about one thing. And so a painting for me or a photo for me that has a lot of stuff going on in it, I want to always simplify and get down to one thing. What do I want to single out and focus on? And so for me, when I look at something like this, that's where I go first of all. Is it's just too much for me. It's more than I want to tackle. I also have to recognize that to paint this for me would be a huge challenge of skill in painting a subject that I don't paint very often. And so in order to well, first of all, in order to do this scene justice, would it be required that I bring that same level of detail that we're seeing in the reference photo? That's not what attracts me as an artist, that I want to spend my time in that kind of control of placing all those elements so that they fit together and flow. I'm much more moving into something that's much looser in my approach. And so I recognize as well that a subject like this doesn't necessarily lend itself to my particular painting style. And I make my peace with that. So let's take a look at some other photos that I could choose to paint from on this adventure into choosing a new subject and painting from a photo. Now, this particular the images I'm going to be showing you are available for you to use as reference photos, including this one. So if it's something you'd love to try painting, you're certainly welcome to do so. The link to this folder where I keep my reference photos for public use is in the description below the video. And okay, so we're going to just move around a little bit. One photo that I considered using today was this one. Let me make sure it's showing up for you. Oh yes, there we go. It's rocking today. Okay, so this one was one I considered using. This is from Lake Como. And there's a couple things that draw me here. First of all, that beautiful strong shape of the mountain is really gorgeous. It's not a fantastic photo in terms of the kind of haziness and the lack of detail in the form of the mountain itself. We have a village perched at the bottom at the shore, and so there's a contrast there between the warm light on the landscape down below there, the kind of washed out haze of the sunlight landing on the mountain, and all of those are things that I think I would really enjoy painting. I also really like the composition here. I feel like it's I'm going to sneeze, just hang on a sec. Okay, sneeze resolved. Where was I going with this? I like this kind of composition as well, with that large mass taking up about a third of the painting. We've got sky and water kind of bracketing it, top and bottom. And so we have some areas that would be very easy to simplify so that we could concentrate on the texture and form of that big mass of land. So I like this as a subject. One thing I'm not certain about, and this is something that I can decide as I paint, as I work and start studies for this scene, is do I like the fact that this photograph was taken on the water? Now, the sense that we have is that in order to take this image, you have to be on a boat. There's no land underneath you, no foreground context except for that water. So if you're not hovering over, you have to be hovering over the water somehow. It's a little bit above eye level, so we know we're up out of the water. And I'm not always certain I like that. It kind of brings, to me, it feels like it brings a blandness or a lack of context somehow. And so I'm never sure, often when I'm choosing a painting that involves a large mass of water like this, I really like to see something in the foreground that gives us a sense of place, that we're standing on solid ground. And I don't know if that's just me, I'm a big landlubber and that's just who I am. Maybe if I spent more time in boats, I would feel more comfortable with that kind of water-based foundation for my painting. So that's something I'm trying to decide. Does it bother me? Would it be possible to maybe crop so that we only have a thin sliver of water? Then that changes the photograph completely. So, we have to decide how much, when we have a photo that has something that we might feel like is a limitation or throws the scene off balance, in changing it, what are our options and how do we feel about them? And I want to just share a couple of those options here. We're going to scroll over to the next image. This one has a lot of foreground stuff that kind of anchors us to the land. It's the same area, just a little further down the coast. And this gives us a real sense of being placed in the scene. We're not hovering over it, kind of outside of it. I think maybe that's the thing I struggle with water is, when you're on the water like this, you're not in the water so much unless you can actually see maybe the boat in the background or in the foreground or whatever. But here I just get this sense of remove. And I like the feeling of being placed in the scene. Here you can have a sense of maybe you're standing on the shoreline. We have the shoreline kind of arcing away from you, which gives a sense of depth and distance as well. With a scene like this, it's just that horizontal of a distant landmass, and there's nothing again to bring you into the scene so much. Maybe if I'm not sure if maybe working with the waves in the water would place you in the scene more, really getting that sense of the bigger shapes of the waves near, and then those tinier ones further away. I'm spending time on this, and we might not get very far in this series of working with photographs and learning how to make good photo choices, and then to work with the choices we've made and make changes. We might not get very far with this because this idea of going through your photos and choosing a photo involves asking these questions. And I really want you to see that. I'm not usually, there's always an instinctive choice that happens, I think. And I don't always talk it out to this extent, but my thought process goes along these lines as I look at my photos to choose something to paint. So in this scene, we do have the boats in the foreground. It makes me wonder if I could put some boats in this scene and get that little bit of context that way. The only problem is it's not as simple as simply taking these boats and pasting them in, because our sense of distance is different and we'd want to make sure that they were proportionally placed. Here's another boat, bringing context into the scene. We're not just looking out over the water and hovering over the water, but we're in the scene. And the tree on the left-hand side is placing us on the land. That kind of pillar in the lower right corner also places us in the scene, although probably I wouldn't include both of those in my painting. That little pillar is really kind of a non-essential thing. And then the boat also gives us some near elements to focus on. That tree in the left side, it wouldn't need to be painted with any kind of detail at all, but it is still a placeholder to put you in the scene and to give your viewer kind of a place to stand. Here's another version, and generally when I'm taking photos, this is a tip for you if you're taking your own reference photos, I really try to take several photos. I like the ability to choose. I can't always tell on location which photo really has the most impact. So taking a horizontal photo, taking a vertical one, getting a little closer to the scene almost always makes my photos stronger. So if I get as close as I can, it's interesting because often if I'm hiking, I'll see a beautiful scene in the distance and I'll take a photo and I'll walk, for 30 seconds more and I'll get a little closer and I'll take another photo. And then I'll get as close as I can without losing, the scene in my viewfinder. And that's usually the photo that's the best one. And then I end up deleting the others. But the closer you can get to your scene, the stronger your composition is going to be. In this case, however, I'm actually feeling a little further from the scene, but it actually to me gives a better sense of composition, that vertical. If we're making, and I think that depends, but if we're making the scene a little bit about that boat, definitely that vertical format seems like it would work a lot better. And suddenly that post on the right hand side, it fits into the scene better as well. So that's just an interesting thing to notice. If I had to choose between these two photos, I would probably choose this one for the overall composition. Now again, I'm an artist who likes to make my painting to be about one thing. So from there, I would need to decide where I want to focus. If my focus is the boat, then everything else is going to be, I'm going to spend a lot less time on every other element, and it's going to support that focal point. Okay, we're going to move on. Here's another shot of Manarola, and I already showed you my favorite photo from that scene, which was this one. But I wanted to show you again that I took several versions. This version brings in that foreground element of a tree up above, and it kind of obscures some of the buildings as well on that side because of that tree. We lose some of the rocks down below, so I have to decide which of these I like better. I haven't made a decision. I don't have to make that call. Here's another one that has a boat in the scene. And again, I like the placement of that boat. It starts to bring in, for me, I think this brings in an element of story. And one thing I want to just point out as well is the way we experience a landscape, and the way you're experiencing this photo is you can't take in every area at once. If I'm focused on the boat, the contours of the buildings blur into the hill and the rocks. And in order to see the details in the village itself, I have to look at the village, and then the boat becomes a little more obscured, and the water. And if I'm studying the water and the rocks I can see deep in the water, then everything else becomes a little bit obscured. And I want to recognize that as I paint. That and focus on every element of detail in the scene isn't really the way I look at the landscape. I have to move through the landscape, focusing on one thing at a time. I just can't take it all in one look. So yeah, I have several versions then of this scene. I changed the orientation and did a landscape version, and the boat now occupies a different position in the scene. And so each of these shows me a different aspect of the scene, and I get to choose what type of composition I like the most, and which I might choose to paint or want to focus on. Here's another scene that has a foreground with a lot going on. In fact, I have two versions of this scene, and one of them doesn't have a person in the walking away in the corner there. And I really like the one with the person, even though, people isn't something I usually paint. I just kind of like the way that tells a story as well. We have a lot of opportunity to get a sense of a moment in a village frozen in time. We've got the fishing boats, we've got the patio with the patio umbrellas closed off in the distance. There's some sheets hanging from the windows of the buildings, and there's just this wonderful sense of a moment frozen in time in this scene, and it makes me happy. I don't know that I would paint this, or that I could paint it and share that same sense of story that I see in this photo. And I think that's a reminder to me that you know, this might have possibility for a painting in future, but I'm also just allowed to enjoy it just the way it is as a story and as that moment caught in time. So, okay, so here's the photo we're going to be painting in this series, and I want to talk about it a little bit. It is definitely not the best photo of the bunch, and I've chosen that for a reason. First of all, I want to recognize that there's, you know, we have a lot of photos like this where we stop to take a picture of something because it was beautiful and it struck us. In fact, I took about half a dozen photos of this particular spot on our hike. And this is, I believe, on the way to Portofino. And when I looked at the photo, it just doesn't have the same magic that it had on location. And as an artist, I love painting places where I've been because I get to invite memory and experience to come and tell a part of the story that my photo couldn't tell. I don't think very many people are going to be blown away by this particular photo. It doesn't have, you know, a lot of dramatic impact. It just doesn't tell the story the way I remember it. And so I have an opportunity then to take this photo and do something with it that shares my perspective and frees me a little bit from trying to match what I see here. Now, the first thing I want to do as I look at this photo is I want to think about making it a little more compelling. There's a lot of wilderness kind of at the bottom. I've got foreground, but it's not a foreground I really want to keep. I like the fact that the foreground gives me context. It places me in the scene, but I don't need to be quite that dominant in the scene. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to experiment with some cropping. And I'm just going to see, I think I have that queued up in another spot here. Let me just find it. There we go. It just fills the page a little bit better. So I'm just taking a drink. We're going to evaluate the photo just based on some of the shapes right now. First of all, we've got sky takes up about half of the scene, maybe a little less than half. And then the other half is all the land and water. About a third of the painting of the photo here is that brushy wilderness that we don't really want to paint. So let's see if I don't have a crop that we can try that will maybe take a little of that, there we go, a little of that greenery away. So here I've just cropped in cropped away enough of the greenery that it doesn't quite dominate the page so much. I've also cropped out a bit of the sky. So now we have about a third of the scene is sky, 2/3, if there was no land at all, then the other 2/3 would be water. So the water is sharing space with the foliage in the foreground and the landmass in the distance. By cropping, I also get closer to that point of land and the house on it, which was the first thing that I noticed about this scene was, I really wanted to capture that little house perched on it wasn't a little house, it was a beautiful villa perched on the edge of the land there. And of course, because when we're out hiking or in the landscape, most of the time elements like that, when we see them in the panorama of the landscape, we notice the details so much better than our camera does. And it really is diminished and kind of dominated by the rest of the elements in the landscape. I experimented as well with some other croppings of the scene. Here's one where I just have a tiny bit of the greenery in the foreground. And now we've really gotten in close to the villa itself. And this suddenly starts to change what the photo is about. And so I have to decide, how close do I want to be? How much do I want to make it about the villa? One thing I noticed was that in this other version, we get to notice the distant landmass just a little bit better. Those farther blue hills and the villages lining the coast there are also kind of a little more noticeable. And as with my artistic license, I could choose to add a little more detail even there and really start to bring in that sense of distance as we're looking out over really a panorama of the landscape. If I'm focused on zooming in to the villa itself, then it becomes less about that panoramic landscape and much more about the negative shapes created by the landmass. And even the reflection in the water becomes more important. And this is all a part of this learning process. What do I want to paint? And how do I and I don't have to make all those decisions now. I really want to encourage you to realize that as well, because that's where the development process starts to matter. That you get to do multiple versions and start to get a sense for what feels the best for you and what might fit your painting style. Now I'm just trying to, there we go. I'm just trying to bring up my reference photo onto my work surface so you can see it. And so if I can make a note of, I believe it's, yeah, we're going to focus on that one today. Let's bring up my work surface. Again, my lighting is just a struggle. In this time of year, we're just going to have to bear with it. And I'm just going to bring up the reference photo into the corner as well. Just takes a second to track it down and make it work. There we go. So, yeah, that works. Okay, first I'm going to just to see if you have any questions. I've been talking and sharing my photos, but I'd love to hear some input. I hear some comments. You like that crop. One thing about popping it up in the corner of the image here is that we get to really start taking a look at the shapes in the scene, and we're going to focus on that. There's some conversation about the sky as well, and I think that is a good thing to notice. Everything my camera does falls short of what it was like to be there in person, and I need to keep that in my mind so that I don't let this reference photo boss me around too much. Okay, so we're going to start just by doing a little bit of sketching. Actually, we're going to start with a warm-up, and we might only get that far, but I want to, I really want to demonstrate, what this process looks like in my studio. And yeah, and you ride along on that. So let's see here. I'm just trying to organize my thoughts. And one thing I really want to do is place myself back in that location. On that day, think about the weather, think about the conversations, think about the people I was with, think about the things that struck me in the scene. And one thing that was really beautiful is that little villa. So many of the houses there on the coast were peach and yellow colors that really contrasted so beautifully with the sky and the water. So we want to look for that. And I'm trying to decide right now if I warm up with something big and splashy, or if we'd just be better off working a little bit smaller to get started. And I think working with these little small squares is a really good way to give you something to work on as you think about your own reference photos through the days to come. So let's just flip this over so I can tape these down. We're just going to work with 3 here. And actually we should probably turn them horizontally. And I know that they'll want to, they're 140-pound paper, I think Arch, and they'll want to flip up if I don't put a little tape on them. So we'll just pin them down on the tops and bottom. That should be enough. For such a small piece of paper, you know, larger sheets, you know, you want to tape all four sides if you don't want them to ripple. But I like, you know, for something this small, it really just needs to hold it in place. And we're going to just, I just realized I have 0 water here. I don't know why I have no water. So we're going to pop up that reference photo for you to study while I go fetch some water. And while I'm fetching my water, I want you to squint at this reference photo and really try to blur those shapes and think about the simplicity, getting back down to the heart of the scene. That's where we always want to start. If it's beautiful, simple, then we can make it complicated later. So I'm gonna go grab my water. You get to just study and notice the scene. And you know, I would encourage you as well, no matter how well you know your reference photo, do the same thing with your own reference photos. Study them, imagine, exaggerate. And yeah, now I'm going to stop talking so I can get some water. There we go. I always put my dirty cup on the left and my clean cup on the right so I can clean my brush with this one and then get some fresh water with this second one. And so it's really, warming up can be really fun when you just permit yourself to play a little bit. And we're just going to start with some exaggeratedly simple marks. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can get a little closer to the action. I spend a lot of time trying to trick my eye into really seeing, just shift it over here, into really seeing what the scene is all about. I also want to notice where the horizon is. That's something else we're going to just work at. But I always want, I want to trick my eye. I don't want to always be putting names on everything. That's one thing I want to avoid. I want to think about land masses, that large triangular shape. I want to think about contrasts, and I want to think about how everything fits together. And so these very early studies, that's really what they're going to be about. Thinking about how do I make this simple, and how do I bring all the different elements together to tell one story, to tell my story. So here we just had, I just created a green shape. I dropped in some orange just to warm it up and to maybe be a hint of one of those warm little villas, or put another little villa up there with another little orange dot. And that's a start. I really have some tools that I already know how to use in this scene. I'm very comfortable painting skies, and I'm pretty comfortable painting the landscapes as well. So when I start to explore these very quick, these are artist trading card size pieces of paper, which I've never really done artist trading cards, but this size forces you to simplify. And the landscape almost has that kind of peachy color as well, so we could just quickly put that in. One thing I want you to notice is my brush is not tiny. This is a number 10 Escoda Versatile, and so it's does a better job of creating those larger masses. We also, in this one, I didn't really put in our little green trees. Let's put that little shape in, give us some context there. This beginning also, I always remind myself that my first layer shows what I don't know. The scene is new, and I'm going to rely on what I think I see. But the more I play with the scene, the more I paint it, the more I'll start to get a sense of being able to really understand what works and what doesn't and how everything fits together. One thing I notice here is as we move away from toward the distant hills in the background, we actually really start to see our watercolor change as well. The most brilliant color in the water is where the land is reflecting. Just down here, we see some reflections from the trees hanging over the cliff edge here, which actually would be really fun to put in. Just some dark shapes there. And there's a strong little dark shape in there as well. And so I get to explore what those look like. And I'm already feeling myself, I want to mention this, I'm already feeling myself start to tighten up. Even though these are so tiny to paint on, I'm already wanting to put in detail, and I don't need to. These are supposed to be shape studies where we focus on those large masses and some strategies for making those shapes beautiful and seeing how they connect with each other. Just popping in those distant hills in the background. I like I'm trying out the hint of violet. I know that's something I like from past paintings. In this particular version, I haven't got the same oranges, and these dark greens have wanted to take over. Let's just sponge them up a little bit. And I'm starting, because I'm painting all of this in one layer, wet and wet, basically, we're seeing some blurring of the shapes together. I really like that for an early start and a warm-up. This is an opportunity to see how some of these shapes fit together and how the colors move together as well. So I really would like to work towards that. The other thing I want to point out is here I used a lavender for the sky. Here I used a cobalt teal, and that, as well as the orange that's missing in this one, really affects the feeling of weather that I have. And so that's just something else to notice. For this last one, I think we want to do one more study, and I could do a lot of these. It's not, oh, I do 3 and then I pick the best one. I want to work until I start to feel connected to the scene, and also until this time I'm going to actually paint this entire landmass in warm colors. It's just an experiment. I want to see if it works. Because the buildings are so warm, I want to start with that warmth and then everything else be cool, and then we can put our greens in over top later. Put in that little warm house. And then I'm going to look for that strong pop of turquoise, which was down in here, and that's almost black, which is probably too strong. We'll pull that color out. A tiny study is a great place to get really brave though with color, so it's okay to exaggerate those darks and see how that affects your painting. One thing we haven't done in this exploration, and I'll probably have it for you for your next time, converting my reference photo to black and white, and then also trying a version where I've really blurred out the details. And that takes a little bit of photo editing. For some reason, Google does not include that in their photo editing options, which I think is just a shame, because distorting, blurring the elements is such a good way to start to see how they all fit together, and start to see those value patterns as well. I know there's different apps that will do it, but I do my cropping in Google, and so I'd like to be able to do everything there. I see some questions about my colors. I've just been kind of working with my palette dirt, which I think is mostly Quin Sienna and maybe some Mars Orange or Venetian Red. So here, we're really exploring this idea of warm and cool color. And then I can maybe go in and dot in some of my greens here at the last. Some greens down here. We'll pull up into the land mass. And as I do work in these early stages, I remind myself again, the first versions of a scene always reveal what I don't know. They're probably not going to work very well. They're probably not going to have a lot of heart or emotion to them. Or a lot of, I'm not going to feel very free to show some self-expression. And all of that is not a surprise. I'm still disappointed, to tell you the truth, when I start a painting and it doesn't instantly come together. But I recognize how silly that is of me to have those expectations that everything's going to work from the get-go. And then I give myself permission to settle into this process, and sometimes being disappointed by a first version, just dotting in a little bit of cobalt violet here. Sometimes being disappointed by that first version really allows me to settle in for the long haul, swallow some pride, and let myself get to know the scene over time. The more time we spend together, the more possibilities I see. And I also start to free myself from the feeling like I need to match my photo or even do it justice. It starts to become a tool for me to spark my memory. I use it to help grow my observation skills. And, I just keep coming back to, what really excites me about these studies? What do I want to share? What do I bring from these into the next version? And having a bunch of little versions like this is really helpful. Another tool you can use, and I'm just going to find another one of these little pieces of paper. So another tool you can use is just a pencil, and take your time to kind of sketch out. And you never see me do this, so watch closely. I might be looking for other ways to view the scene, especially if I start to get a little bit stuck, because I'm not good at being creative when I'm working in known quantities all the time. If I'm always doing the things I've always done, there's not a lot of creativity there, and there's not. I often just get bored. I get bored with my scene. I get bored with my skills, and I don't want to do that to myself. And so this is a good time when I start to feel that, I feel like I'm just not breaking free. Something's holding me back from really feeling like I can be myself. That's straight lines because it's a building, and maybe a straight line over here, but then bushes hanging down over it. Anyhow, I really want to give myself permission to do whatever it takes to knock me loose from that feeling like I always know what I'm doing and I always have to know what I'm doing. And there's a wonderful cloud over here. Let's put that in. And I made it a very weird shape. There's another wonderful cloud here. Just move that way a little bit. And some shadows there. And, you know, if I don't have a black and white version made, then maybe this is a beginning for me to start to think about the scene and how it fits together in those dark values and in how those shapes fit together. I kind of like that. Let's put some color into it just for fun. I just felt like I really needed a thick, dark saturation of cobalt teal, so that's where I'm going with this. I don't know why I felt like I needed that, but I'm trusting it. As soon as I get out of my head and start, you know, it's kind of for me, I need to stop thinking quite so analytically. And once I do that, I start to let my little sense of what the painting needs take over. That's nice. I like that. And when I can do that, then I start to have fun. Look how just exciting that feels in comparison to these guys. I need to kick myself out of my comfort zone, and I do that with warm-ups. I do that with little pieces of paper that remind me that not every painting has to be precious. Let's put those oranges in. And when it works, it's really fun and exciting. I want to, let's put the yellow green and the green gold. Instead of the dark green. And let's put in the purple, and then I'm going to stop. I really like this little white gap over here. I like that's the cobalt violet dark and deep, and I think it actually kind of is invisible right there, but that's okay. We'll just leave it. A little bit of lavender in there. So this is the time for a new reference photo. Use these opportunities to remind you that you can play with this scene. Change it up, try different things, break yourself loose from that feeling like you need to be zeroed in on the scene. I actually feel like I have a lot more freedom when I start to get give myself permission to get a little bit of distance from my scene. And that's really what these little sketches are doing for me, is I'm pulling away from every single detail, even at this stage, and just working to simplify. The more I get to know the scene, it's not about, the better I'm able to put more detail into it. I'm learning what I can edit out, where my impact, where I want to place my impact. And I have to just cap this off by just mentioning and iterating that you might be looking at a new reference photo and looking at your versions of that photo and thinking, I don't know how to paint something that feels good to me. I don't know how. Angela's talking about feeling that yes in your heart when that authentic work comes out, and I don't know how to get there. None of us do. The only person who can answer that is you. So exercises to help you trust yourself and to break loose from feeling like any strategy or photo or system owns you. Those are the best ways that I know of to create a space where you get to do what works for you. And it does involve experimenting. It does involve making little versions that, looking at, let's look at mine again. I'm making little versions. Some work better than others, and some are more exciting to me than others. Some show more of my skill than others, or a stronger sense of color color handling. This one over here, the land mass is a little bit lower, and it actually doesn't work quite as well that way. I like the placement of the elements in this scene a little bit more than in these other ones. But when it comes to which one makes my heart pound a little faster, it's this guy. And partly because of the climate it was created in. I'm trying something new, shaking loose from predictable. That gets my gears going, and it gets me excited, and often starts the path towards something that's really new and exciting for me. So knowing myself and looking for those yes moments, they propel me toward that final outcome that I'm so excited to share, and reflects a lot of who I am. I don't know which version is going to turn on the lights, and I don't know that the next version I do is going to have that same impact as this little guy. But I get to, you have to start somewhere, and you have to trust that when you look for those little yeses in tiny versions, in warm-ups, in corners of the painting, that things seem to click. You can keep building on that to create that final outcome. And we're going to continue with this reference photo and this subject in our next live painting session. I believe, do we have one next week, or is that our? We have a guest coming this month, and I think we do have one more painting session this. I'm trying to look. I should look at the calendar. We'll let you know. We have a special guest this month. Steve Mitchell is going to paint with us, and I can't wait to see what he has to share. He and I are old friends, and so that's coming later in the month. And then we'll also have more on this topic as we continue through the next few months. And just hang on a sec. I'm just taking a look to see if you have any questions. Yeah, we will be continuing on in this topic, but as we go through the next few months, because it's a big topic. Working from reference photos, a lot of us do it. As we move into winter, we have winter. We can't. A lot of us can't be outdoors painting, and or even getting out and taking photos that we like. So we're using the photos we've accumulated over time and working with them, and being able to have some fun with your photos and use them as a prompt is a really, it just brings so much possibility into the studio, because one photo can start an entire series that shows different aspects of that scene and different facets of you, the artist, which I think is pretty cool. So thanks for joining me today. We're going to wrap up for now, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts and questions in the community, so do feel free to share those there. Thanks for watching.